I'd like to welcome you all to this panel on retail markets and retail investing. We're joined by Jeff, Jeremy, and Brandon. We're having a few technical issues, so just to get things started, we'll start with Jeremy, who I've known a very long time, back in the early days. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience and perhaps tell them about your varied retail journey of the last 12 months?
Yeah, for sure. I got into the psychedelic market over 2 years ago. We, when the decriminalization happened, we started researching all the companies that were coming out. I met the guys at Entheon very early on. I was able to get involved a little bit with them. Long story short, kept moving on. I started the Shroom Street Twitter account. I've been working that account I've just been kind of doing what I can to support them and keep involved with the sector. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. You're muted, Henry.
Andre's muted there, but I can imagine it's going to go over to myself afterwards.
This is one of those nights. Just while we're waiting for the others, what changes have you seen in the retail landscape? So when we first met each other, there was a lot fewer companies. It was how have things evolved?
Yeah, it's a very good question. When we first got on, we've seen Numinous come on the stage. We've seen MyMed and a few others that I maybe not even be worth naming come on the space. There was a lot of and there was just like a lot of hot air going to these companies. I think it was mostly they were just like stories and namely Shroom pushed the whole sector up, and then when the whole fallout after Shroom, everything just kind of went flat. Nobody was raising money. Nobody could raise money for a good few months, and then I would say spring last year is kind of when things started to happen. Spring 2020. Once like I think it died off. It was going in the spring, and then it died off for the summer. And then last fall, when companies accounts started going public and everything, that's when the whole sector started to wake up. And now it's like it's insane. We have more companies than I could count on the exchange, and there's a million different names for different companies, and they're doing all sorts of different things, a little bit of a different way. It's actually quite fascinating to watch it come from zero to where it is now. It's pretty exciting. It'd be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah. Do you think that the space is becoming too crowded in terms of the retail landscape? Are we jumping the shark in terms of the number of companies that are listed? And does that make it difficult for new retail investors to pick the right companies?
To make a decision, I would say so. Like when we first got into this, it was very simple. You had 5 or 6 companies. One was chasing the therapy clinics. One was going down the drug discovery sector, and one was manufacturing drugs. It was quite simple. And now it's branched off into 10 companies for each. And we all have been through the cannabis industry. They're not all going to be doing as they say. Whether they intend to or not, that's up to them. But yeah, it makes it a lot more challenging, and it's going to become more and more challenging. And even for me, as a retail investor, I like to buy and sell stocks all the time. It's like someone comes at me with another name, I'm like, another company. Like, come on, what do they do? And
yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's starting, maybe I might be biased because I've been here since the beginning, that it does feel saturated, but maybe for other people, not so much. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell the audience a bit about what you do, and then I'll start firing some questions at you.
Sure. I'm the senior editor, Psychedelic Stockwatch. I had a background in cannabis and working with public companies in a lot of sectors. Dived into psychedelics at about a year ago. Are you hearing this echo?
No echo.
Okay, I'm hearing a terrible echo, but I'll try to ignore it. So yeah, I dived into psychedelics about a year ago and was a little bit skeptical, but then I looked closer at the fundamentals and just got more and more encouraged the closer I looked. So I went all in, and now a big booster for the sector.
Hey, Jeff, just a heads up.
Just for the kind of new retail investors that are tuning into this, given your expertise, what kind of tips would you offer them? As Jeremy was just saying, it's a very crowded landscape. These companies are complex. I've got a whole team of scientists and lawyers and experts. And it's hard enough for a fund. What tips would you give retail investors in this very complex, crowded environment that we're facing?
Simplify things a bit. So at Psychedelic Stockwatch, we're very capital focused. So, we look at companies that have been able to raise capital, have a solid financial position, and, we're not experts on the science. So, the capital is a metric that we can compare these companies with, see who are relatively best capitalized relative to their market cap. And, that would be a good metric for investors to start with, because it's a capital intensive industry. And if you don't have the funding in place, you're probably not going to be able to execute on your business plan.
Could you just say what they're looking at is, amount of funding raised and effectively how stable they are from a purely financial perspective? You're not looking at operating models, you're not looking at underlying science. It's just, has this company got weight and power behind it in financial terms? Yeah,
ability to raise capital and to raise it on reasonable terms. If you're having to do very dilutive financings, then that kind of defeats the purpose of it. But what we're seeing, generally speaking, is companies financing at strong prices and doing very robust financings. And that's probably what surprised me the most in recent months, is just the incredible amounts of capital that have been flooding into the sector. We did an article on this noting that over 500 million US came into the sector in the 4 months after Compass went public. And over 350 million of that was public companies alone.
And do you think when the inevitable Atai IPO happens, do you see that as being an inflection point for the other retail companies?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with Compass and it happened. And now the sector is more evolved. So I would expect, if anything, a bigger impact from the Atai IPO than from the Compass IPO.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. And Jeremy, what do you see happening over the next 12 months? Is probably a bit long, but let's call it 6 months from now on the retail markets.
I'm expecting to be range bound until the Atai IPO. I don't expect, unless Compass comes out with something groundbreaking that's going to kind of come out of nowhere with regards to their FDA approvals. I think it's going to be range bound, and I think Atai IPO is going to bring a lot more hype into the sector and new money.
Thank you. So Brandon, I believe we can hear you now, and apologies. Could you just tell us a bit about Sagacity and your history in the psychedelics market?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that, Andre. I've spent the last 5 years in capital markets through my past company, which is followed.
Am I the only one that can't hear him? I suspect not.
I can hear him.
So, Henry.
I believe it's just yourself there, but no worries. It's one of those games, right? I've been having this for the longest time. Whether it's technology, whether it's the audio, will always one thing or another always goes. But I'll continue here and just speaking in the sense that a lot of the companies we covered were starting off in the cannabis space, and the similarities and differences, of course, I know that, but the similarities between cannabis sector and the psychedelic sector has been incredible, because when you first came into the cannabis space, nobody understood it properly. There's a lot of stigma surrounding it. The larger banks and different investors wouldn't touch it. So it's very interesting to see how investors really gained their knowledge, and then how the chaff really started falling out in that space that's going to be happening with psychedelics as well. You're already seeing that. You're already seeing people. I'm talking to my mom, who's a conservative Christian, about psilocybin, LSD, and how there's trials and research going. She's like, what are you talking about? But she's interested now because she already understood with cannabis that, wait a second, we were proven wrong with what we thought there. Maybe we're wrong about these different compounds as well. So that's what really brought us with Sagacity Capital Media, speaking more about the psychedelic space, because one, I'm just passionate about it as an individual. I believe there's a lot of ability to find yourself with psychedelics, but also if you see the plethora of documentaries that are out there speaking on how PTSD, how depression, all these different things have been treated with psychedelics, it makes you so interested and so excited to see what else that can happen within that space now that's really going mainstream. So that's really my background, how I came into this, and specifically into the psychedelic space as well.
Jeremy was talking about stocks being range bound until the Atai IPO. What do you think, what other events do you think could allow stocks to break out of where they are currently? And also, if you could just touch on the question of how artificial that is, in that we seem to be in a market that's signal driven by the very biggest players. What's your view on how the smaller companies can get traction under the shadow of Compass and Atai?
Yeah, the very last part of what you said, marketing and promotion. You don't want to be over promoted. I understand that, but we're in a world right now where so many people have gone online, and there's all the conferences that you would normally go to, all of the luncheons that you would normally go to, even just investor meets. They're not happening in a lot of areas throughout North America. So it is online. It's congested online. A lot of people are fighting for those eyeballs. So you really do need to have a good marketing program. You really do need to be getting out there and getting in these webinars and getting the proper traction that way, so people first even know who you are. You spoke about raising capital, Jeff. I think you're 100% correct, because what was it? Psych recently, RVV. I've recently raised a lot of money as well. We're seeing these raises go out, but speaking to some of those brokers, and you start asking for a little bit of these raises, it's amazing how quickly they're going as well. That reminds me once again of cannabis. A lot of people are wanting to get in there. So there's obviously a lot of interest within these stocks. There's a lot of minds and a lot of eyes that are coming to it. But Trip, Ridley Holland is catching a lot of people's attention there. So people are at least knowing about the sector. But where's it going to go from here is very, very difficult for me to say. I do believe Jer was talking about, is this saturated? I think there are a lot of companies, and there's even more coming down the pipeline. So it is an argument to say, is it saturated? Yes, probably. But also, I think it's really interesting, though. We're seeing a really big pullback right now. And it is in line with what's happening with North American markets, and just like all speculative plays, when North American markets start going, usually that speculative dollar is the first to go into cash and run. So I think even just seeing pullbacks in these companies, funny enough, will bring more eyes to it, because now people are like, oh, I missed it with Numi. Oh, I missed it with this company. You're getting another chance. And you are seeing some pullbacks. I think that in itself will cause more traction. But at the end of the day, it's marketing and promotion. It's putting your head down and getting your news releases out there, getting the milestones that you're looking for. But you got to be heard and you got to be seen.
And companies out there that are truly innovating.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So just sort of exploring this issue, Jeff, if I've got a smaller entity, I'm listing on the CSE, the NEO, the TSXV, whatever, how can I convey what I'm doing sufficiently loudly that I'm not going to be drowned out by much better capitalized companies? Is that possible through platforms like Jeremy's, through platforms like Brandon's? Is it possible for the smaller entities to compete in a market like this?
Well, so you're asking that question to a writer who considers himself a storyteller. So, my answer to that is always going to be yes, get their story told, because that's what these companies need to do to generate some interest. People like stories. You tell a good story about a company. If people like the story, they're going to like the company, and that's going to motivate them to do their due diligence. And then that's how you start generating investors. So, get out there and tell your story, whether it's, through us or through other entities, get the stories out there.